This is Letter from America. Today's topic, political toddler CCC is 1 year old, is gaining national support and scaring the 60-year-old ZANU PF Dizzy Pachinoi. Zimbabweans are celebrating Happy Birthday, Citizens Coalition for Change. 1 year old today and fighting against the 60-year-old ZANU PF. On January 22 last year, 2022, a new opposition political party was born in Zimbabwe. The Citizens Coalition for Change, or CCC, was led by advocate Nelson Chamisa. CCC was born after the Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, or MDCT Alliance, which had been led by Chamisa, had been illegally seized by the Mnangagwa government and handed over to the ZANU PF acolyte Douglas Monzora. Monzora, who had acted in league with the Thokozani Coupe, began the process of recalling MPs from the old MDC alliance if they refused to pledge allegiance to Monzora. What Mnangagwa, Monzora, and the ZANU PF Dizzy Pachinoi had hoped was that the MDC alliance, which had won all urban seats in 2018 elections, would now be reduced to ZANU PF puppets because the leadership of the old alliance was now without any party. At the time, Chamisa and his team, who had been deprived of their head office, money due to them under the Political Parties Financing Act, looked like they had reached the end of their political ambitions. Mnangagwa was gleeful, smiling ear to ear that ZANU PF would not have to face the MDC alliance giants under Chamisa in the by-elections scheduled for the year 2022, starting in March. With 3 months to go before the first by-elections in March, Chamisa and his team had still not stated what they planned to do without the MDC alliance. There were all kinds of suggestions for options for this dream team. One was Chamisa must form the MDC Chamisa party, just like the MDCT was for the late Trangirai several years before. Another such suggestion was to challenge this illegal seizure of the MDC alliance name in court. Yet another suggestion was to form a brand new party. But there were fears that people were used to the MDC since its formation in 1999, and that it would be difficult for them to get acquainted with any new name. And for some anxious weeks, in January 2022, Chamisa's team spokesperson Fadzai Mahere was under tremendous pressure from everywhere to come up with a new name. Almost every day, Mahere had to appeal by saying, just keep calm. We know what we are doing. But many people did not believe she really knew what her leadership was doing. But no one was more anxious than ZANU PF. Surprise, surprise, surprise. ZANU PF kept on screaming that Chamisa and his team were clueless about their plans for the future. This got many people puzzled. Why was ZANU PF spending sleepless nights and anxious about what Chamisa was going to do? Then, On an uneventful day, on January 22, 2022, Chamisa announced the new party, the Citizens Coalition for Change, or CCC, with yellow as its new color. Chamisa told ZANU PF, "You can take the Harvest House building with you. You can take the name MDC Alliance with you. You can take the name MDCT with you. You can take all the money for the party, but you cannot take the people with you. So let us meet at the election battlefield." Chamisa's messianic tone to the announcement of the new party and its yellow color spread like wildfire across the length and breadth of Zimbabwe and the whole world. All of a sudden, everyone who was anyone inside Zimbabwe and outside Zimbabwe, in diaspora, except the Dizzy Pachinoi gang, was now adopting yellow in one form or another. The by-elections on March 26 were held. This baby, CCC, barely 3 months old, won 19 out of the 28 National Assembly seats in the long-delayed parliamentary by-elections. The former MDC Alliance MPs who had been recalled by Bonzora, all without exception, won back their seats now as CCC MPs. What about the MDC Alliance under Bonzora? It did not win a single seat. When Parliament resumed, it now had CCC MPs. It had indeed been a week of extremely bad news from Mnangagwa and ZANU PF. First, CCC members of Parliament made a triumphant entry into Parliament, and they were greeted by dejected ZANU PF MPs who were still in shock that a 3-month-old CCC trounced the 60-year-old Dizzy Pachinoi party at the March 26 by-elections. If ZANU PF had, as is very well known now, hoped to keep the former MDC Alliance stalwarts out of Parliament, they were dead wrong. But even more ominous for ZANU PF was the fact that the CCC MPs were and are the wind of change, of national discontent that is gathering momentum in the country. To the utter disgust of the ZANU PF speaker Mudenda, whose shrieking voice constantly berated the CCC MPs with threats of damnation, his bullying tactics did not damper the excitement and enthusiasm of the CCC MPs, whose colleagues banged loudly on their desks to welcome each other. CCC MPs ignored the speaker for whatever he said, and they shouted even louder, "Yellow, yellow." One CCC MPs was heard to say, "Tadzoka, tawa yellow, we are here, we are yellow, and better." Speaker Mudenda, who in the past had responded to and complied with every illegal letter of recall from the ZANU PF acolytes Thokozani Kupe and Douglas Monzora, must have had an egg in his face when some of the same people he kicked out came roaring back triumphantly. Attempts to block CCC MPs from entering Parliament because they were wearing yellow ties initially failed. The MPs stormed in and completely ignored the Speaker's ruling that they should not wear yellow ties. Welcome to the era of defiance politics. In a remarkable contrast, the Economic Freedom Fighters (EFF) MPs in South Africa wore their red party dress styles to reflect what they stood for. No one bothered them. They were not called to order except when they misbehaved. Even Mnangagwa wears his tacky scarf on official occasions. Nobody has complained. The fact of the matter was the people of Zimbabwe had effectively overruled Mundenda and his ZANU PF henchmen and returned the recalled MPs with bigger electoral votes. All efforts by ZANU PF to intimidate the people of Zimbabwe to vote for Monzora and surrogates in the now defunct and abandoned MDC-T alliance were rejected when Monzora was soundly defeated. By the end of the year 2022, and after more by-elections, CCC had won 60% of all the seats. By all accounts, the main takeaway from the recent elections in Zimbabwe demonstrated two objective facts in the political landscape. The first undisputed fact is that this one-year-old CCC has gained a landslide victory. CCC is now the political force in Zimbabwe. The second undisputed fact is it is slowly sinking into the ZANU PF mindset that there is a national wave of discontent and anger at this party that has been in power for 42 years. Indeed, as former British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan said in 1960 to the South African Apartheid Parliament, the wind of change is blowing across Africa. Zimbabwe is at the cusp or receiving end of that wind of change. Of course, ZANU PF has known all along for many years about the discontent against its despotic rule. But what ZANU PF had in the past refused to acknowledge until now is the extent of that frustration, despair, utter discontent, and the fact that it is gaining momentum across the length and breadth of the country. Three things frighten ZANU PF right now. First, Zimbabwe is now a tinderbox of national discontent. The vast majority of Zimbabweans have had enough with ZANU PF. Everyone has been transformed into a vendor. Zimbabwe is now a country of vendors. Young Zimbabweans, who form more than 70% of the country, see no future for themselves in Zimbabwe. In this politically toxic environment, nobody knows what single incident or a combination of events will spark off a conflagration of mass uprising that will potentially leave the country in ruins. It has not happened yet, but that does not mean it will not happen. Secondly, ZANU PF knows and fears that the army and police are getting tired of protecting party officials and thugs through arbitrary persecutions of CCC supporters. Without the army and police, where would ZANU PF be? This is exactly what the late Robert Mugabe asked at a secret meeting some years ago before he was overthrown in a coup. Mugabe knew that ZANU PF had survived and still does by hiding behind the army and the police. But this might be about to change as we come into 2023. It is reported that for a long time, at the police and army camps, soldiers and police officers voted for CCC candidates in the last by-elections. One widely reported event was at Chikurubi, where practically every prison officer voted for CCC. The old guard ZANU PF army and police, who occupy the higher echelons of power and control, are retiring and dying off. They are being replaced by a more youthful generation who has no allegiance to the Liberation War credentials, for the simple reason that they were not born or were just babies when independence came in April 1980. Advocate Chamisa was being fed baby food by his mother in 1980 when independence came. His approach to today's political environment focuses on improving people's lives and opportunities. And his messages resonate very well, not only with more than 70% of the Zimbabwean youthful population, but also practically the vast majority of Zimbabweans who see their lives stuck in the bottomless sludge of poverty. The new generation of the youthful officials, some right at the top in the army, the police, and the CIO, do not follow the outdated and useless ZANU PF slogans. ZANU PF are proud, probably tired of their sing-song, "We should continue to be in power because we fought the armed struggle or Chimurenga for the liberation of this country." But to the majority of Zimbabweans, this monotonous sing-song sounds like a hunter who goes out on a hunt and brings home nothing, but still boasts he went out to hunt nevertheless. Unconfirmed reports in the grapevine suggest that the new officials have been telling ZANU leadership that they will be professionals in their dealings with the criminal elements, regardless of what party they belong to. They have also said they will follow the military and police rules as specified in the police and army manuals. The 2001 Police Act stipulates that it is an offense for a police officer to use unnecessary violence or neglecting or in any way ill-treating any person in custody or other person with whom he may be brought into contact in the execution of his duty. The United Nations Basic Principles on the Use of Force and Firearms by Law Enforcement Officials provide that whenever the lawful use of force is unavoidable, security forces need to use restraint and act in proportion to the seriousness of the offense. Law enforcement officials should not use firearms against people except to protect against the imminent threat of death or serious injury. Many diaspora Zimbabweans have sent messages to police officers who are known to have used political motivated violence against civilians that they risk being prosecuted when a government that follows the rule of law is established in Zimbabwe. Police are now aware they can, for the most part, be easily identified not only by members of the public, but also by fellow police officers who may not approve of what they are doing. They also know that their names and pictures can be published in the social media for the whole world to see. And third, the new generation of Zimbabweans are not easily scared by ZANU PF intimidation, threats, and acts of violence. Last year, they confronted the police in Gokwe and Kwekwe, where the CCC rallies had been banned and ZANU PF thugs had attempted to disrupt those rallies. The policy of CCC, as elaborated by President Chamisa, is a peaceful political campaign and avoid engaging in violence. However, it is agreed and accepted that under the international law, individuals have a right to defend themselves in whatever ways they deem fit if they are attacked. CCC youths now have the mechanisms to spontaneously react when their colleagues are under attack. In one case, a farmer tweeted, "Wonderful, our youths have managed to repel the attacks from ZANU PF thugs and things are calm now at a rally in Kwekwe." There are other situations where CCC youths have been able to subdue the ZANU PF thugs who were assaulting their colleagues. In Gokwe, CCC youth stood up against police who had brought water tanks to disperse the CCC rally. The youth did not disperse but stood defiantly. Eventually, the police themselves retreated as the youth threw stones at them. However, the old guard ZANU PF elements are still stubbornly daydreaming that they will rule forever. ZANU PF Secretary for Administration Obed Mpofu declared that the ruling party ZANU PF will never surrender power, saying that they are going to be in power for a very long time. Well, someone should remind Mr. Mpofu that 52 years ago, someone said something similar. And to remind Comrade Mpofu, on March 2, 1970, the then Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, the late Ian Smith, boasted that there would be no black rule in Rhodesia in 1,000 years. But exactly 10 years later, black majority rule came to Zimbabwe in 1980. And Ian Smith lived long enough to see the wind of change sweep across the old Rhodesia. As a matter of fact, Ian Smith headed an all-white minority party in the black-ruled Zimbabwean parliament. It will be interesting to ask Comrade Mpofu about what he said when ZANU PF, like Ian Smith, finds itself out of power, given its loss of credibility and support from the vast majority of Zimbabweans. A former member of ZANU PF has described the party as a shadow of its former self. That is, a shell without substance. And if police and army support is withdrawn, ZANU PF will collapse like a deflated balloon. The story of the CCC must be told and retold for future generations. It is the kind of fairy tale narrative that tells today's and future generations that once upon a time, a young, penniless, and homeless 44-year-old defeated a creepy, unsavory monster called ZANU PF Boo 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 Dizzy Pachinoi, who had a history of massacring innocent civilians. To be more exact, this Boo 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 monster killed and devoured more than 20,000 Zimbabweans. In the past year, CCC has been victim of unspeakable and numerous atrocities from ZANU PF thugs. Top CCC party officials, including Job Sikala, are in jail on trumped-up charges. But CCC survives because it is deeply ingrained in the mindset of the vast majority of the Zimbabweans. But the unanswered question in this situation in Zimbabwe is, what will Zimbabweans do? Will they allow themselves to be slaughtered like sheep? There are slogans some human rights activists have been chanting in calls to action by the Zimbabweans. Some of these popular slogans are Zvakwana, Sokwanele, enough, Kusikufa ndekupi. We are many, there are few.
This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of the situation in Zimbabwe. Thank you for listening. This concludes today's broadcast of Letter from America, a weekly in-depth analysis of